Hi everyone, I'm Caroline Webb and I'm here today with Josh Davis, who is not only the author of an amazing book, 2 Awesome Hours, but he's also previously a professor in psychology at Columbia, so he really knows how to be at our best every day, and that's the reason why we're here to talk about our respective work on that topic, how to thrive, how to be at our best, and specifically how to be at our best in small amounts of time. And I read a book called How to Have a Good Day. You read a book that was even more focused on a smaller amount of time, 2 hours.
Yeah, a whole day. Who needs a whole
who
good
needs
day?
a whole day?
Right.
Yeah, so perhaps we could start just by talking about why is it that you were so attracted to such a small amount of time, to talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, so the first answer that I'll give you will have to do with why a small amount of time, and the second one I will get to why 2 hours.
Okay.
But the thing is this: we can be amazingly productive for a half hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is, where you're hitting everything out of the park, right? You're figuring out exactly who needs to be on your team, how you're going to get this project done, so on, right?
Yeah.
And if you're anything like me, you can then be worthless for 3 days in a row.
Yes.
Right. So.
I mean, I have no idea what you're
Right,
talking
yeah,
about.
you've read about that.
Right,
Exactly. Right, yeah, but I have that issue, right? So the thing is, if that can happen, there must be conditions. There must be things that we can learn about. How do you set up those brief times when we can really be at our best? And so that was the kind of the launching point for this book. Can we turn to the neuroscience and the psychology research, physiology research, related fields, right, and learn something about how to set up those conditions?
Yeah.
The reason why I focus on 2 hours is because most people have no awesome hours in a week, right? And anyone really immediately upon recognizing a few of these different ways of thinking or operating can have 2 awesome hours in a day.
Yeah.
It's a reasonable and achievable thing to do that can make a very big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go on.
Well, I was curious to ask you why focus on the day, like the individual day, because that really caught my attention.
Yeah, it's interesting that we both chose small amounts of time when there are so many books out there that are about your career and the sort of broader span of things. And definitely the first few years of my work as a management consultant, I was focusing on large-scale change, huge change at sort of company level, organization level, whether you badge it as cultural transformation or performance turnaround or whatever. And often the goals were very lofty. They were to try and boost morale across the whole organization, or improve collaboration, or boost innovation, words like that. And so often my work ended up coming down to the small stuff, the everyday things. There might be these big goals and they were the right ones to pursue, but actually in order to make them happen for real, you needed to think about how you set up a meeting, how you handle it when things go wrong, when someone makes a mistake, what do you do? How do you have a difficult conversation? How do you think about the way that you organize your own time and your mind? And over time, I just found that more and more my work was getting smaller and smaller scale, and I was doing this work with senior people and throughout their whole organizations and focusing on this small stuff. So that's what made me interested. And then, as I started to think about the idea of a day being the building block of your life, there was this quote that came into my field of vision, which was from Annie Dillard's The Writing Life. And she said, the way we spend our days is, of course, the way we spend our lives. And after that, I thought, oh my God, right, absolutely. And of course, I'm not saying that I have let go of my long-term life goals, but I have become much more interested in the fact that the way you spend each day does end up being the way you spend your life.
Mm-hmm. Well, also, I guess, as you were saying that, one thing was occurring to me that when you do work with an organization or an individual and you're thinking about long term and they get the concept, right? Yeah. In order to innovate, we need to have these kinds of priorities and we need to get everyone thinking in these ways and these are going to be the challenges. And then it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Right? People understand it. They get behind it and then it doesn't happen.
Intellectually they understand.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you start looking about, well, what are your behaviors every day, I think that's where you can find a lot of the ways in which we, where is it that we fall off? Where is it that we get diverted or we get back into the old way of doing things? So, essentially you haven't finished the work. is the way I'm looking at it, unless you get down to the specific day.
Yeah, the specifics, the small habits. And you just mentioned this sort of the points at which you get derailed. And I remember in your book you talked about these points of inflection, these decision points in your day, that they're often where things go wrong. Could you say a bit more about that?
Yeah, so the idea of the decision points, this for me has been transformational personally. So as I was writing the book, of course, as I learned things, then sort of now I know how my brain works better. Right. I'm gonna use that, right? Yeah. So one of the things that's really core for is, we've all been told, let's focus on what's important, not what's urgent, right? And it makes sense. I don't think there's anyone who would doubt that.
Yeah.
Maybe some hedonists, I don't know. But it's not so much a challenge really to know what's important. And that I know some people might differ with me on that. But if you think about it this way, if you ask me on vacation, what's important for you to be doing, right? Then doing something like this is very important, right? Writing that next piece is very important. And I know that, but when I sit down to work, I've got a million things where I'm just being reactive, and I owe things to people, and I'm filling out forms, and I could be reactive all day. So one of the things that really stands out to me is that the issue is that we don't have that many opportunities in a day where we're actually fully mentally capable of recognizing what's important. And what I mean by that is this, and this is something that you talked about quite a bit as well, and I think you did a better job talking about it than I did, but we'll have to fight over that. But that we're on autopilot most of the time.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So and this is a good thing. This frees up our mental resources that we need for deliberate thinking, so that we can use them for things that really need them. Autopilot is very complex. It's not just about, breathing or lifting a fork or something. Yeah, exactly. But it's, you can be an expert at running a meeting. You can be an expert at thinking of branding strategies, right? And over time, expertise means it becomes more automatic. We don't have to think as deeply. We can recognize patterns and just go with that, right? So we get into these modes. You get into, if you're a computer programmer, programming mode. If you're a leader, you're getting into meeting mode and such and such mode. Or maybe you're getting into writing a report mode, right? Once you get into that, we're not as aware of all the other things that are going on, right? It's not that you're not conscious, but you don't need to be as aware of everything else that matters in your life. Time kind of zips by, right? And this also happens. You start checking email, or you start reading the paper, or you start doing those fun things that are distractions. But you get into these autopilot modes, and time can just zip by, and we're much less aware of it. When you're in autopilot, it's very hard to just willfully stop yourself. Yeah. There are a few moments in the day, though, when autopilot turns off, and we can learn to capture these moments and make them decision points. Right? So autopilot turns off essentially when we come to a crossroads.
Right.
So some researchers believe that the purpose of consciousness is to make a decision when autopilot can't handle it.
Yeah.
I can't write a paper and have a conversation with my wife about our plans at the same time. There's no autopilot that does that. Right? I'm at a crossroads. Suddenly.
Can you check that with her?
I have tried, and I have very good feedback.
Right.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Yeah. So it's a very rich feedback system. Yeah. So I have tried this. So that's the moment when we bring on a much richer system network of prefrontal resources as well as other brain resources that allow us to be very thoughtful and deliberate. Those are those moments, though, and this for me is kind of like the real clincher, is that when we're in those moments, we often feel very unproductive because we're aware of how unproductive we are, and we just want to rush through it.
You suddenly realize, I haven't done anything meaningful for the last 10 minutes.
Exactly, or the whole morning, right? But that would be, again, my issue, not your issue, right? So we, you catch yourself, you're aware of it, you just want to get moving.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the rare moments in the day when you have the conscious resources to actually step back and think about what's important. It's a decision point, and if you don't take it, you're going to be on autopilot soon, and another hour is going to go by. Yeah. So we have to learn to take those.
Yeah, and I suppose the meta idea behind that is that if you think about, I was talking about your life being made up of days. The currency of your days is where you choose to put your attention, and we can be absolutely on autopilot the whole time on that front. if we're not careful, as you say. But, we might breeze through these moments where we're suddenly aware of where we're putting our attention. And so one thing that that you write about and that I care about deeply as well is the idea of being intentional as you can, recognizing that we're automatic creatures. And to build a routine that means that either at the beginning of the day, or if you're a terrible morning person like me, it might be the night before, where you say, okay, what is it that really deserves my attention, most of my attention today? And within perhaps a conversation or a meeting, what is it that I want to most look out for? Knowing that if you don't articulate that deliberately, your attention will go wherever your autopilot decides you should go, and that's not really necessarily where you want it to go.
That's
and
right.
So that intentional that setting of intentions is such an interesting thing, because it can take only a few seconds, but it can really change the way that you are making decisions in the moment when you come to one of those decision points, because you can go back and say, oh, actually, I remember now, I said that if I did nothing else today, then that I wanted to write that article or whatever. So what are your tricks for making sure that when you come to those decision points, your intention is top of mind? For me, it is definitely the kind of earlier decision about what are the 2 or 3 big priorities of the day, where do I really want to put my attention? What's your trick?
Yeah, so definitely that.
Yeah.
If you have some time earlier, when you've done it, it's much easier to remember it.
Yeah.
In the moment trick, when you just find yourself all of a sudden with a decision point, or maybe you weren't clear, or maybe nothing really jumped out as the most important that day, but some things are going to matter more. The thing to do at those points is to literally stand up, because it's so easy to be reactive to what pops up. It's so easy to have that urge to just want to start so you can be productive, at least use the time
and
well.
your hand is right by the mouse, you can open up the browser. Facebook, for those of you who are watching on Facebook, is so easy to reach for.
Right.
Don't switch off.
Right. Exactly. Facebook would be the one exception where
one
it's
exception,
perfectly
you should
fine.
definitely keep
always,
that open, for sure.
Always react to Facebook. But anything else, right? So it's protecting yourself. So if you literally stand up, and it doesn't need to take more than a couple of minutes, but if you just step back until you're able to remember what it is that's really important, and if you're not clear, to actually ask yourself, wait, what do I really want to get out of this day? What's the most important thing today or this week? Right? And then once you've done that, you can choose to start. When you start on the right thing, you can finish the day doing the right thing. And if you don't, that's how time gets wasted, because you'll get on autopilot.
Yeah.
Another thing I do in that moment, and I love the idea of standing up, because I realise that when I do that, it does really help to refocus your attention on what you really care about. It is a reset, it's a physical reset. I find it helpful to ask that question of, when I get to the end of the day, what will I be delighted that I've achieved / so annoyed with myself that I've not achieved, depending on which style of motivation I'm into. And I often sometimes have this just single post-it note. I did it yesterday. There was one thing, so I was coming to decision points, and my mind was getting distracted in exactly the way you describe. And I was getting really annoyed with this. And so I wrote on a post-it note, the biggest post-it note I could find, in huge capital letters, the thing that I needed to do next. And I put it in the middle of my screen so that I couldn't look around it. I had to stay focused on it. And I guess whatever works, right? But the point is, we've only got a small amount of conscious attention, and we need to spend that wisely.
Right. Well, I think that's another thing that you and I both wrote about, and it's this idea that when we understand our bodies and our brains, we can work with that much more effectively. And when we don't, we often end up actually working against ourselves. And you don't necessarily know it. You might just think this is a difficult task, or I don't know how to do it. But oftentimes, we're doing it at a time when we don't have the mental energy for it. Or and that's another thing, I guess, that I like to do during these decision points, is to check in with myself as well. To not just ask what's most important, but what is my mental energy right now? Am I depleted or not? And I know that that's something that you've written about quite a bit as well.
Absolutely. I mean, it gets to the point that obviously a lot of what we're talking about here is self-awareness, and starting to notice where your mind is, where your body is, in a way that it's so easy not to when you're really, really busy. But to actually notice, I'm noticing that I'm finding it harder to concentrate than I was an hour ago. My mind is scattered, or
decision fatigue is often something that kicks in for me. I notice that I've been having to make a lot of calls, a lot of decisions on, sometimes quite small stuff, but my mind is tired and it needs a break. And then the same as you say physically, just to kind of start to be more aware of the fact that you haven't moved. And we have devices that help us with that. I've got, permanently have something on my wrist that vibrates if I have it. Exactly. But yeah, I think there is this sort of sense of self and that awareness of where we're at. There was a little thing buried in what you just said there about knowing when you're at your best. Could you say a bit more about that? Because I think that's something we both care about as well.
Yeah. So it's, first of all, I think one of the important findings from research is that we are not at our best all the time, right? And that's actually something useful that you can take advantage of. Now, it means that strategically it would make a lot of sense to think about what's most important. What do I really want to show up for? How can I be at my best for that? And recognizing there are other things that are less important, and you don't need to be at your best for those. And because we're not at our best at all times, we can learn to be more at our best more often. But because we're not at our best at all times, to save that. So once in a while, sure, there's an email that's really important. I'll give that my thoughtful attention at a time when I'm really wide awake. Most of my emails are not that important. I'll save those for a time when I'm really kind of spent and I'm finding I can't think clearly. Right? Because it's okay to me if I make a few spelling errors and things like that, right? So that is, I think, a key piece in terms of knowing when you're at your best also. There was something I wanted to ask you in what you said too. You said being aware of when you've had decision fatigue and so on. I find, at least for myself, that when I'm on autopilot, it's actually hard for me to know that. That I come to be aware of it if I give myself a chance to become aware of it. So if I'm just sitting there, I'm kind of feeling like I'm fine, I can keep going. I can keep just banging out a few more things. But if I actually get interrupted, for example, and then step out and go get a glass of water, I realize, oh my God, I actually am really not thinking that clearly right now. I'm not at my best. Let me strategically now choose to do something else. Or, I'm really good right now. Let me stop doing that other task and do something more important.
I often set myself a timer to make sure that I don't get lost in what I'm doing and that I do stand up and stretch or go for a walk. Have a timer on my desk, and sometimes I set it for a short period of time if I'm really noticing it's really hard for me to concentrate and I just need to try and figure out a way to single task rather than multitask. And then other times it's more a question of just making sure that I don't just, as you say, just get lost and then lose track of time and realise I'm not doing great work. And the other thing that I'm a fan of is something I call batching and zoning. Perhaps I should say zoning and batching. So zoning in the sense of, as you say, there are some times of the day when you know that you are intellectually at your peak. And it's really great if over time you can start to chisel away at your calendar. It doesn't work initially if you've got a lot of other people determining what happens in your day. But you can over time start to be a little bolder about protecting that time if you know that that is the time that you do your best thinking. And for me, that has always been the late afternoon, which is not at all what a lot of people say, which is one of the dangers.
Just follow the averages, then that shouldn't be true.
Right. So one size fits all advice on these sorts of zoning questions. When is your peak intellectual zone? I mean, the evidence on average will tend to say you should do it in the morning, and for me that's not the case. But the point is to know for yourself when it is. And then, as you say, to then collect together different types of tasks, so you're not asking your brain to switch mode too much. Gather together, email, blitz that a couple of times a day, as you say. Be clear, when you want to kind of perhaps push through a bunch of calls. So I try not to put them back to back, because then you often end up being late. But I do try and bundle my calls together so that I'm in call mode. And I have a particular time of day when I tend to meet people for coffee, if I'm going to have little networking chats. So that I'm terrible first thing in the morning. So I do the kind of bleary-eyed email thing just to kind of clear out. Then I do my social stuff, the interactive stuff, because I know that will wake me up and make me feel happy.
Right.
And then the afternoon is the deep thinking stuff, all the client, the deep client work.
Right.
And just knowing what type of work goes where, you can't always control it, but just knowing how that's going to work best for you, that's been transformational. And that's been a gradual transformation for me over 20 years, I would say.
Yeah. Just, for me, it was a much more sudden transformation, actually. Really just shifting the order. And it came as a result of doing the research for the book.
Right.
Actually, had your book been written already, I could have just read it there, but it came as a result of that, and so I experimented. It was just shifting the order of things.
Right.
So that I noticed I was able to be present for the things that mattered, and ended up, what's happened is I've ended up spending a lot less time overall working.
Yes, me too.
Because I work on the things that matter, and I now have, the more that I do it, the more it's almost fun to think about what really matters.
Yeah.
And I find myself working on those things, working on them well, and then moving on, and deliberately choosing sometimes that there are some things I'm not going to get to, even though I know it's going to be frustrating. Everything has a social obligation connected to it.
Yeah.
And so some of them I deliberately choose not to, and sometimes people do get upset with me about that a little bit.
And how do you deal with that?
Well, I apologize.
Right.
But it tends to really only be a little bit.
Yeah.
Right, and it's sort of, and often it's, thanks. What happens if somebody follows up, and I say, thanks for following up. I'm so sorry that I didn't get to this earlier.
Yeah.
And I sincerely mean that.
Yeah.
But I also know that for me to be able to be at my best for them and for everyone, that was the thing I had to do. And I don't go around advertising that to those people, because they'll feel bad that I'm deprioritizing it. Other times I prioritize them more, but it's that thing about thinking about the order.
Yeah.
And I did want to also, there's one thing you said about kind of the time of day, right? So you mentioned that the social piece for you, you're going out and connecting, networking, and you feel energized afterwards.
Yeah.
Now everyone is different, of course, and so some people find that energizing, some people find that draining, some people really find it energizing to work on a spreadsheet and figure out the details of what
like that too, but yes.
Some people don't. Some people I love being on stage and presenting. Some people find that draining, right?
Yeah.
So knowing which things are going to give you energy and which things are going to drain you also is useful for that planning. For
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
And what I would say is, so sometimes we have the freedom to choose when we do things. Sometimes we don't. When you don't, if it doesn't come at the same time as your, good time, maybe it's not the first thing in the morning, but you're a morning person. Maybe it's late in the afternoon, you know that you'll be drained. The way I like to think about, something that you and I both wrote about, I'm curious your thoughts on this as well, is that there is a reset button.
Yes.
The reset button is 20 minutes of moderate exercise.
Yes.
It's the research on exercise, we usually think about it as, how do I, stay thin and live longer, right? But those are long-term benefits. They're hard to connect with emotionally. Yeah. They're true, but they're hard to connect with. But there's also research, actually hundreds of studies, on the acute effects, the effects within the next few hours.
And that's what I'm interested in too. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the boost in focus, the boost in mood, and the fact that happens so quickly. And I absolutely...
And
reliably. It's absolutely, if I get stuck, if I'm faced with a problem I can't solve, I've got a pretty low-rent elliptical trainer in my office, I jump on that, I go for 10 minutes, the answer is obvious, I get off and I slap my forehead and then I get on with whatever.
You always slap your forehead.
Obviously, yes.
Right,
So
okay.
I'm just like, oh yes, okay, so that's obvious.
Right.
Yeah.
The research suggests you have to slap your forehead.
Obviously, that's right. There's a very idiosyncratic paper on that.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. The other thing which I would say I have become better at, and I was really skeptical of initially, was the nap, the 20-minute nap. Not everybody has the opportunity to take that in the middle of the day. But in terms of reset, exercise is generally going to be a bit easier than taking a nap. And even going for a slightly brisk walk for 10 minutes around the block is going to help.
We'll do something, especially for the attentional piece, not as much for the emotional piece.
Exactly, yes, exactly. For 20 minutes, you might get more of the emotional boost, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, we're almost out of time. Now, this is a cruel question to ask, because, of course, you have lots of tips that you dispense. But if you think about your own day, what is the one thing that if you did nothing else, it would be the thing that you do every day to help you be at your best?
Okay, in my head, I'm really fighting between two things, both of which I have mentioned already, actually.
Okay, that's all right.
One of them is the exercise as a strategic tool.
Yes.
It is so powerful and so reliable. that it would just be crazy not to use it.
Yeah.
But the other one, if it was one thing, if I had to say one thing, it would be to think about what is important for me today or this week, and then to really build around that and say, okay, that's happening at 10 p.m. on Tuesday. How am I going to show up for that most important meeting? How am I going to be able to be mentally present for that? What's going to be necessary for that? Because oftentimes that one event or that one project is actually more important than a month's worth of work.
Yes.
That's the case for many of us now. So what is that one thing? How will I show up for that? And taking that seriously, building around that way. And so all of the various tools then can be in service of that one thing.
Yeah.
What about for you?
So I agree with all of that, and it is a horrible question. I hate it when people ask me, what's your one tip? I've got 100, so.
Right.
I think one thing I would add to that has really made a difference to me over time is to end the day by looking back and saying, what was good about the day? And it's interesting because, again, it's a question of just deciding where you put your attention. And just as you only have a certain amount of conscious attention to devote in the moment, actually looking back, your brain, of course, does not remember everything. And the things it does remember are very malleable. And we have some choice to some extent on what we choose to remember and essentially, therefore, how we choose to rate our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And so by deciding to end the day by saying, okay, I'm going to direct my attention to what I thought was good, it also helps you the next day when you say, well, where is it that I now want to put my attention? And what is it that I now think is most important? So that's a big thing that I always end the day with. I think it's made me a happier creature at times.
Yeah, the research on that one is clear
Very
as
solid.
well.
Yes.
And the emotional effect, as well as the belief that you're capable of achieving these things,
self-efficacy.
then it's going to create a self-fulfilling prophecy. Thanks for that one. That's one I need to adopt. Yeah.
Now I'm going to go off and exercise for 10 minutes. Thank you everyone for watching and listening.